everyone. Today I'm excited to talk about 4 graphic novels that address biculturalism. And biculturalism is the phenomena of growing up in 2 different cultures. That's a simple way of saying it, but basically people who grew up in 2 different cultures or a certain area where there's 2 different cultures being embraced. The first book is Stargazing. I've talked about this book a lot, but one of the things that's so neat about it is that it's about a small community of Chinese Americans. So these main characters have, parents or grandparents who immigrated to the United States from China. And it kind of addresses some of the challenges and also some of the really neat aspects of growing up in that bicultural situation. And one of the characters, her family's more traditional than the other characters. So they kind of have a little bit of a interesting clash there of very traditional culture versus a little bit more pop culture. And also the story is just really touching. It's about 2 friends who kind of learn how to be true friends even in the face of opposition or even when it might be embarrassing or hard to stand up for each other. So it's a really uplifting story and also teaches a lot about culture. Pashmina is another really cool one. This is about a girl whose mom is from India, but now she lives in the United States. And it's a unique challenge for her because her mom won't tell her anything about like where she came from, her life in India. And so this girl is really curious about, what is it like there? Like, is it better than here? Because living in the United States is kind of hard sometimes, so she has a lot of questions that aren't being answered. And there's a really magical way that she finds answers to her questions, and she learns more about her mom and why it's hard for her mom to talk about her life in India before coming to the United States. It also kind of talks about the challenge of the generational gap, where one generation's like, well, I came here to give you a better life, and the younger generation's like, well, what was our life like back there? Because it's not easy. It's not easy living here and being Indian American. So it's a really, really cool story. And both of these are really appropriate for younger kids. This book's a little bit of an older audience. It's called Almost American Girl, and it's about a girl whose mom is from Korea. So she's comes to the United States with her mom and ends up feeling like a disaster. She doesn't know English. Everybody teases her and makes fun of her. But it's a memoir, so it's pretty much a true story about the author. And it's really eye-opening to see the kinds of unique challenges she went through as a Korean American. So I'd really recommend it. It's really eye-opening, and I think it helps to teach empathy and compassion for those who, are learning English still, or who live between 2 different cultures and don't quite feel like they fit into either one. So it's a really good book. There are some there's some language a couple times. There are people that tease her a lot and trick her into saying bad words and things like that. She does use some language, but there isn't really any violence or graphic images, more of just a couple of language instances. And so I'd recommend this for older audiences like teens or young adults. But it's definitely eye-opening and educational to learn about. And this is a book I also really recommend. It's called They Call This Enemy by George Takei, and it is a memoir also of his life. So his experiences growing up. So his parents came to the United States from Japan, and this story talks about, I'll just read the back here. George Takei's story reveals the important lessons of the World War II Japanese American incarceration that still need to be learned today. They Call This Enemy is a compelling must-read for all ages. So this book was eye-opening because it really gave an insight into what happened to the Japanese Americans during World War II that I think should be talked about more and is sadly forgotten by a lot of people. Something that I wasn't super familiar with. So reading the book was really good for me to get an insight into the situation. A lot of Japanese Americans who had businesses and had built up their lives in America um, experienced really hurtful and extreme racism and trying to think of the right words to describe it, but it's sad. It's sad to read about that they had, they had to leave businesses and homes and be treated inhumanely just because they were Japanese, and people were all freaked out about the bombing on Pearl Harbor and things like that. And these people were like really upright Japanese American citizens who were suddenly the victims of a lot of serious racism. So it was a really eye-opening and powerful book to read, and I definitely recommend it. It's great for learning a little piece of history and also learning the challenges of being in a bicultural situation. People who, for one moment, they could be accepted as Americans, and then the next they could be seen as enemies for doing nothing just because they were of Japanese descent. So that was a great book to read. So these are the 4 books I recommend. These 2 are for older audiences, teens and up probably. And these 2 are for all ages, probably like 6 and up, or 8 and up, or 4 and up if you have a reader like my little boy. But these are 4 great books about biculturalism, and I hope you enjoy. See ya!